Rick and Morty comic issue 50. We start out with Rick telling Morty to get him a gadget that looks like a toaster from the sub-basement, while Morty's busy playing on a Switch. I hope Rick's being sarcastic when he says he hopes he knows what yellow looks like. Morty's surprisingly irritated with him, instead of used to him. And Rick tells him that the last time Morty brought him the wrong gadget and killed all the tapers on Earth. And Morty says it's weird that no one's noticed yet. Huh? First off, Rick would have looked at the gadget after he was given it and immediately recognized that it was the wrong one. Second, how would his gadget kill tapers in particular? Tapers aren't even a thing in this country, so that's some range. And third, I wish I knew how long it's been since they were made extinct, because if it's too long, scientists would notice. Then Morty panics about seeing all the tubes in the sub-basement and jumps to a nasty conclusion about it, probably based on the shape of the tubes. Why did Morty go to the sub-basement and disobey his instructions? Why doesn't he go down here every time he's sent to the sub-basement then? So why would Rick even bother sending him down to the sub-basement anymore instead of getting stuff himself? Erasing Morty's memory of this place after spending hours here would obviously be more trouble than it's worth. It's not explained how much work Morty had to put into getting here, and it's not explained how he actually discovered the place. You'd think the door to it would have been locked, so he'd just assume it had gadgets in it and ignore it. I'd rather have a good explanation for why he got here. Even something as sadistic as he's brought here to relive his memories as a punishment. After all, the whole story is going to be like that anyways. That being said, I remember loving Morty's mind blowers in the show. And I was happy to see an issue about the same concept, and I'm excited to see what memories Morty's going to remember, even if they're going to be cruel to him. They have to be, or else Rick would have no reason to make him forget them. For the most part, aside from the red tubes. Rick says that these are memory tubes, full of memories that Morty had him remove. So is he lying about Morty asking for it? I know he's lying about the red tubes. You'd think a lot of the stories in this very comic would be ones he'd beg him to erase his memory of. Like the time he saw ugly Morty reconcile with his sister just to die. So this could be an opportunity for at least one continuity nod. But I'd rather not have time be wasted. Morty somehow asked why he'd want to have a memory removed. Shouldn't that be obvious? He also somehow asked why there's so many, when he knows Rick. Rick explains that the memories have to go somewhere. Apparently, his brain isn't a computer desktop and he can't just drag stuff into the trash can. But the tubes would be the trash can. If his analogy worked, they'd have to stay in his brain. And his reference was dated because he means the recycle bin. Unless Max still used the trash bin, and he uses Max. Rick then puts a helmet on him to show him his bad memories for apparently no reason. I remember that the show did this better. I think he explained that he's just doing this to speed things up, because when he lied about what the tubes were, he always snuck in and re-experienced them anyways. And even if he just left it at their bad memories, he still insists on re-experiencing them because curiosity killed the cat. So this just saves everyone some time. But I'm still wondering why Rick's enthusiastic about doing this. I guess he's forcing himself to act happy. Because it's pretty sadistic to do this instead of just erasing his memory of the fact that he saw this by holding something in front of its face. And then he could just go on as normal. I love seeing a whole bunch of shorts like this, because it means we get a lot more insights into his daily life than just the 2 insights we see in each issue. In the first memory, Rick's pouring liquid from a vial, and then Morty asks what he's working on over there. Rick spills it all and gets mad at him because Morty distracted him by startling him from behind. Somehow Morty doesn't take responsibility for it when it was clearly his fault. I guess he does feel bad about it, but is frustrated at having to feel bad about it and lashes out because of it. Rick's called clumsy and says that he never dropped anything and has plate spinner's hands. Then after Morty's confused, Rick stares at the orange liquid and sees bumps, and tells Morty to get the microscope goggles for both of them. It turns out an entirely new microscopic life form has been created, and they're evolving ridiculously fast. Rick fortunately points out how lucky they got. Rick says that they've evolved into a culture based entirely on mutual respect and love, and it's a perfect utopia. How could he call it a utopia and a culture if obviously their fast evolution means fast death rates? How could they get the time to form a culture and society if they die so ridiculously fast? This is ridiculous. But it was sweet that Rick liked seeing how nice they were to each other, even though he's a nihilistic cynic. He's not actually opposed to nice people. He's not acting suspicious of them. Morty thinks it's sweet, and he reaches for a soda without looking at it because his goggles killed his peripheral vision and he's reckless. So he spills it over them, and starts to cry. It would make sense if he still accidentally killed a culture of nice people, but they weren't microorganisms that instantly evolved into people. They were just another race of aliens instead. But this is more interesting, at least, so it's worth it. Still, an infinite amount of universes means that there would be an infinite amount of universes where they weren't killed and were sent to another planet to have a whole world to themselves. So no wonder Rick didn't react like Morty. And it'd take forever to find a universe where those microscopic organisms exist and show Morty them, and it wouldn't erase his guilt. Rick doesn't help when he tells Morty he's a genocider. He was already feeling guilty. Why is he smiling when telling him that there's even more bad memories? Is he really that mad about when he called him a boring person last issue? I guess so. And logically, why is he keeping all those tubes around? Well, maybe they're hazardous waste that couldn't be. This is Rick. He'd be fine with teleporting them to outer space and ditching them there, even if they were dangerous. Apparently, he enjoys this, which is the only explanation I can think of for why he doesn't simply get rid of all the tubes after he stores the memories. He's letting his emotions get in the way of doing the smartest thing. He claimed he wasn't a grudge holder in an earlier issue, but apparently that was just a load of bullshit. I mean, he was petty enough to vaporize someone just for bumping into him earlier. So, he really is just doing this because he's got a petty grudge against Morty. I mean, he has given him a lot of reasons to be annoyed with him, so I guess it all built up after a while and he snapped. Morty says he needs to take responsibility by knowing what else he did. Rick lampshades a bad idea and says that he shouldn't follow any impulse because he's not smart, doesn't have good ideas. I'm sure he has had good ideas. Maybe they don't always work out. Like Summer saw a lame new season of her show. But it reassured her that it being cancelled wasn't so bad. Rick's exaggerating because he's annoyed with him. Morty tells him, "Just stick it in me, Rick." And Rick snarked, "Jeez, phrasing, Morty." That was a clever joke. Hopefully the next memory will make more sense. We see an episode of the poorly named Ball Fondlers. The tough guy says they're going to land in the jungle, fight their way through a bunch of henchmen, and reach a lair to do even more killing. I guess Morty and Rick are here, because otherwise, unless the episode sucks this much, what would this have to do with them? Of course they are here. What, did they get a different artist for this? That was a bad idea. Why change artists in the same issue? It's not like it's a fan comic and so they had no other choice. Morty thinks this is cool, and Rick fortunately reveals that Morty was using his Morty adventure for this. Like, I say fortunately because it proves that he's still using the Morty adventure idea. The other guys jump out parachuting, and Rick snarks that parachuting is the least efficient way to stage a siege, and he could have just portaled them all down. Why didn't he say that to them and get them to do that? I guess he was just that respectful of them that he humored them and didn't want to offend them with a different idea because he loved the show so much. He was smart enough to realize that it would just annoy them. Like how he annoyed the Vindicators. Morty says to not embarrass him here and just let the adventure be the adventure. So they parachute anyways, and someone tells them to watch out for trees. Some shooting starts, and the cute one says, "Nice work." And he's asked who's flying the plane if he's here. Logically, he wouldn't be here. There's an explosion and some building gets set on fire. Rick asks where Morty is, and it turns out he got caught in some vines when he fell into the tree, and his rear is exposed to all those characters he liked. No wonder he'd want to forget that. It ruined the show for him. I guess it's merciful to him that he and Rick didn't do anything evil that time. It's a good thing for us that we're getting to see the whole story from Rick's perspective instead of only seeing Morty's. Because realistically, Morty wouldn't have seen all that shooting. But without it, we could have had room for more stories. I don't want this to end. It's not like this is too cruel. Even with the last one, those microorganisms existed for such little time and none of them are deep, interesting characters. So we had no time to get attached to them before they died. It'd be worse if Beth was the one who was killed. I'm guessing there won't be nearly enough memories because it's just a comic. Well, I say that, but I don't know how long it would take to read all this. Maybe it'd take more than half an hour. I don't know. Realistically, Rick wants to stop here. It makes sense because the whole time he's just been standing there bored. I don't know if he was actually watching. Morty begs for more. fortunately lampshading that he can't explain it, something's just compelling him. I wish there wasn't a different bad artist for the third memory. Why wasn't it just the good artist the whole time? Morty says that Summer's going to be mad at him if he doesn't find her iPhone charger, and he'll die before he uses the knockoff one ever again. Then after he opens his mom's bedroom door asking where the charger is, it turns out he caught them together in bed. And somehow Beth wanted Jerry to wear an unflattering chicken mask the whole time. You'd think she wouldn't want that, no matter how ugly she thinks he looks. At least her outfit's nice. At least Jerry explains that someone told him that if they wear their mask, they can reveal their true selves. This is all their fault for insisting on doing this during the day instead of at night. Since when does that happen? I guess she really couldn't wait, so it makes sense. But this is the most generic thing for a kid to be traumatized by ever, and the cosplay doesn't make it interesting. But it was bound to happen sooner or later. Then it turns out that at this point they were divorced, and Beth was just tired of striking out on Tinder and called Jerry for a quickie. It's implied that Beth knows Rick can erase his memories because she says to go get Rick because Morty's traumatized. If she didn't know about that, she'd have no reason to think that Rick would make him feel better, especially with his traumatizing adventures. But this explains everything. The reason she's okay with Morty going on adventures with Rick is that not only does she think Rick can protect him, but she knows Rick can erase his memories to keep him from being too traumatized. It still doesn't explain why she's fine with his life being risked, but I guess she just has a lot of faith in them. Rick's curious about why Beth's asking, and she and Jerry lie to him about it. How is Rick supposed to know which memory to get rid of if he's not being told the truth? Would he be able to program it right then? I mean, we don't see him typing on the keyboard during the scene, so I guess he's not manually programming it every time. It just knows which memory he's being traumatized by and gets rid of it. But it can work on memories that aren't traumatizing too. So it has to be manual. Beth says Morty can't sleep. Rick figures out the truth on his own, and is mad enough to shoot Jerry with a ray gun out of nowhere. Oh good, it's explained that all he did was neuter him. Well, knocking him over and covering his entire body in light? So what took him so long? He really loves Morty if he was driven to do this to punish Jerry for traumatizing him. And he really loves Beth because he didn't do that to her. It's confusing that after Morty's memory is erased, he wakes up in the sub-basement. Logically, you'd think that never happened because he'd immediately ask what all those tubes were and get a Morty's Mind Blowers episode, and this would always happen. He says he wants to get back to cataloging unused sports equipment. Morty says he can't remember how he got here. Then Rick asks him if he knows where his hockey equipment is. Morty says that he thought he saw it, and realizes that a little bit ago he was upstairs looking for something. I guess this caused him to remember the event all over again. Or not. Rick panics while holding the pink tube, and selfishly puts it back in the helmet just to find out where his hockey stick is. Since when does he care about hockey? I guess he just started looking for the hockey stick because he would have checked every closet if he really cared. So why is Morty being walked out of the room? He would have erased his memory anyways, and he did because Morty was able to remember this only when he was given that tube. Realistically, Rick's not done with Jerry for what he did to Morty. I was wondering why he had a hockey stick because he's not Canadian, but it turns out the writer thought that too, and Rick says he doesn't even know how to ice skate. So he gives Jerry some awful memory back. It makes perfect sense that he'd keep Jerry's memory stored so he could torture him with a whole bunch of them whenever he wants. I guess Morty's not experiencing this. Either that or Rick spliced in his own memory with Morty's. In the fourth story, sadly with bad art, Summer asks why they're at the library. Wouldn't they have had this conversation before they went? Because Morty would need to convince her to come with them? I guess she forgot because she was too busy looking at her phone. Morty says he needs a book for his book report. She points out that he could read books online. Then he reveals a pop-up book of demons. Then it turns out that he can pull out a demon that looks like him. Is that another replacement Morty? I guess the reason this book is in a normal library is that another Rick made it and disposed of it here because he's evil. You'd think he would have warped it to outer space, but I guess if he made a portal to outer space, it'd suck him into it because it'd be sucking up the air. He'd warp it to another planet, not a library. This is stupid. Did Rick put this book here as a prank? Because he doesn't act like it later. Summer tells him he should put it back, but he's idealistic enough not to listen because he's a Morty. So he says they're going to become the best of friends, even though the demon's hissing for no reason. Surprisingly, he does let Morty have ice cream with him, and swing him on a swing and look through photos of him. They even share a bed together, though the demon looks more demonic for no reason and smirks for no reason afterwards. You'd think this would make him the opposite of more evil because someone was nice to him. He gets woken up and screams because the demon was intimidating him for no reason at all. I don't care if he's called a demon, he was still nice enough to spend quality time with Morty instead of doing this right away. But this was foreshadowed. But then the foreshadowing was immediately contradicted. Rick then kills him with a thrown book. That's creative. He lampshades Morty's stupidity and says that the demon was going to engulf his soul. But why? What would he have to gain in that? Morty says sadly that they scrapbooked together, but apparently that meant nothing. If it did, and he was just waiting for a good opportunity to do that to him, then why didn't he wait a lot longer before trying to kill him? Then Rick would have killed him before he did anything, and Morty would have even more reason to be traumatized. In the next memory, Morty's happy at seeing a bunch of unicorns, which are even smiling. Rick doesn't care and is waiting for some people impatiently. Logically, unicorns would be scary because they'd use their horns for hunting, or at least protection, like rhinos. They wouldn't evolve horns for nothing. It makes sense that they'd exist somewhere. They're just horses with horns. Morty wants to name two of them. It's interesting that even a guy is getting excited about unicorns. It makes sense because anyone would be excited at seeing that a supposedly fictional thing is real. Rick complains that this never goes well after he names them, and Morty takes a ride on one. He wants to take them home as pets, and then Rick says it's showtime. He wants to trade money for crystals. I guess he's cheating them and the crystals are worth more than that money. Either that or he needs the crystals for science. One of the aliens grabs Rick and wants to take him out, and reveals that he's wanted to get him for a long time. I guess because he did something wrong that he knew about. After he mocks him for having no backup, other than his grandson, who he knows is an idiot already, Rick activates devices in the unicorns to make them into a dangerous army. At least the gore isn't green and not red, but it's still hard to look at. Rick points out, "You think unicorns have giant pointy horns on their heads for decoration, Morty? They're for protection and defense." He wishes Rick would have just used the vaporizer or shield. Rick naturally complains, "I hacked into a supposedly mythological creature's brain and all you can ask is why I didn't build a giant microwave? Where's the art in vaporizers, Morty?" I guess even he gets bored of those. And it'd be too inconvenient and cumbersome to bring an entire army with him every time, and Morty wouldn't approve. It turns out this was all for nothing, and Morty says he killed half his unicorn friends for nothing. So why did the unicorns die exactly? They seem to be attacking just fine. I don't see how they could have been killed. Of course, this has happened before. Why did Rick ever convince himself that the next time would be different? And he has to have Morty with him every time to hide himself with his Morty brainwaves. He has the best amnesia rate ever if he's able to not only erase his memory, but also erase any negative association the unicorns would have. Even someone with amnesia would still, say, be wary about shaking hands with someone who had a tack on their hand the last time they did it. So he'd be scared of unicorns the next time he saw them. He just wouldn't know why. But if he still had the negative associations and found things familiar, he'd just remember the bad memories on his own anyways. So Rick must have found a way to prevent that. He just reset his brain to before that happened. Then the next memory, Morty sits behind a laptop that the internet is hilarious with its streamers, filmed antics, and collections of fake ghost videos. Someone screams for help, and it must have been pretty loud if he still heard Summer even with headphones on. I guess no sound was playing at that point. She says someone's killing her and she's gonna die. He runs into the room in a panic with a ray gun and kills Tinkles. It turns out they're having a tickle fight. Morty fortunately explains that because he had his headphones on, that explains why he couldn't recognize the tone as a playful and joyful one. It was her fault for saying those two sentences. She could have avoided this if she told him about Tinkles. Summer tells him to get Rick before it's too late, and I immediately wonder how she could have actually been imaginary first and then made real. I guess Rick did it. Why did he do it again? In the next memory, Morty says near the spaceship holding something that's shaped like a gray hammer that Rick wants him to stay here, track movement, and bring him the hammer if he asks for it. He expects me to believe he has better things to do. Rick snarks at this and says that if what he thinks is in there is legit, It'll mean better science for him, which is better for everyone. Oh, apparently he is benefiting humanity with his science. That's good. He even says he's doing the universe a favor. Morty relatively says he wants to be in on it, not just waiting around. Even if Rick tried to keep him safe by telling him to stay where it's safe, he'd fall into danger anyways. Rick says this cave is filled with monsters he doesn't want to wake up, and he'll be in and out. Of course, something goes wrong. He goes down with a rope and wishes he had silent hover boots, and then drops his portal gun. He wouldn't have dropped his portal gun if he kept it in his lab coat's pocket, right? I mean, it seems like this could have easily been prevented. So Morty brings him the hammer. Morty doesn't want to use the hammer on the monsters because they look like happy babies. He complains that this is why he didn't bring him, and they're about to tear him apart. So Morty recognizes what's really important and saves Rick while crying and having his eyes closed, which you'd think might cause him to hurt Rick, but I guess Rick stayed out of the way. It seems like while this issue is needlessly cruel to Morty, maybe the reason I don't hate it is because of all the stories being interesting enough to make up for that. And it's not like the plots are all because the characters were complete idiots. Rick complains that this is a ripoff and he needs better intel, and he got 3 more of these just like this at home, so this was all for nothing. In the next memory, Rick says they need to find out how to get a note to Birdman Squanchy, or even get his portal gun back, as he's standing behind stupid energy bars and a soldier in armor with Morty having a backpack that has something in it, saying that now it's his time to shine. Light bars are stupid. I guess the prison designers were idiots, because if a power outage happened, all the cells would be unlocked, so they should have just used regular bars. The butter robot from the show is finally back. After Morty won a science fair with it, he started building him up, and they're good friends now. Oh, so this is gonna finally explain what happened to this guy. Rick says amusingly, "What is he gonna do, Morty? Do you think these guards are one pat of butter away from a heart attack?" The robot says that Morty taught him he could be whatever he wanted. Rick's snarking at him, and it turns out the robot's been training in Aikido. What a dumb robot if he thinks this will work. I mean, they're even saying all this right in front of the guard, warning him about the plan. So of course the guard smashes it. Though I guess the guard's of an alien race with super strength, and that's why he can effortlessly smash a robot with his mere foot. So that was dumb. Morty had no reason to think this idea would work out. The guard's gigantic compared to that measly butter robot. It's a shame we never got to see how they escaped. I guess Squanchy and Birdman blew a hole in the prison and beat up the guards. And I'm just wishing I knew how they got in this situation. In the next memory, after Morty seems to put in a red tube for some reason, it turns out Morty's playing a video game near him, and Rick makes an overly long-winded, cynical speech about the overly cutesy-looking game, where nothing's happening the whole time. He's snarky about it because it lazily crosses over tons of copyrighted characters with each other. Why is he leaving it with Rick instead of walking away with it? Logically, why'd he even play that game near him and tell him what it was at all? It's so predictable that Rick ended up playing the game anyways. Probably because there was a red tube. So he learns from the game that friendship and family are what truly matter. So how is Morty seeing all of this when it's from Rick's perspective? Did Rick add his own memory to this? Why? It's an embarrassing memory of Rick's. I don't even know why he didn't destroy the tubes. I don't even know why he let him play the memory. He realizes he was wrong and wants to make it up to Morty, so he searches for great cosplay for the game. Then he ends up startling Morty in his bed, and because he's so excited about the game, he freaks Morty out, and this causes him to wipe his memory. I feel so bad for Rick here. I guess this was necessary because Rick put him through a lot in this issue, so we have to see him get embarrassed. But I'm so baffled that Rick let him put a red tube in, which just embarrassed Rick. It made more sense in the show where he had to distract Rick to get the red tube. Then we see Rick enjoying himself as he shows Morty a memory of his family laughing because his head looks like a chicken. Since Morty didn't accept and appreciate his grandpa for getting into his favorite game after he mocked him for liking it, it kinda makes sense that he's happy because he's punishing Morty for really hurting his feelings. We see Morty get scared by a bunch of evil puppets, and then Morty says he can't take this anymore and asks what they've done. Rick's hopefully being sarcastic when he says, "You sure you want to stop? We never even got to the section of the times your family accidentally admitted in front of you that they don't really love you." So that's why they're letting Rick go on adventures with him. That explains everything. But Beth acts like she loves him sometimes. Maybe it's all Fruity and Slips letting their subconscious frustrations with Morty's flaws come out too strong. As in, he's a wimp. Morty cries and naturally asks why Rick would let him watch all these. Rick explains that it's because he does this all the time. He finds his room and there's no stopping him. He's tried talking him out of it, locking him out, but he always gets in here and rewatches memories to mess himself up again. So it's just easier at this point if he lets him do it and erases him again when it's over. But it'd be even easier if he just got rid of the memories. He could warp the tubes to another planet, so that's not the whole story. I think he wants to punish Morty too. Like for being a wimp or bothering him a lot. But we don't need Rick to explain this and be even more unsympathetic. Morty begs him for help, and Rick smiles and says sweetly, "You know I got you." If he was really sadistic and evil, he'd never erase any of his memories. But I guess he has no choice, because Beth and Jerry would nag and pressure him into doing this regardless. Not to mention he'd be useless in his adventures. Maybe Beth and Jerry were the ones who got him to start doing this in the first place. Summer wanders down here. I wish I knew why, because she's completely focused on her phone. Why wouldn't she just stay in the living room? Maybe she wanted them for something and couldn't find them, so she went here. She asks Rick if he needs her to get the Morty reboot tube, and asks him to remember what happened last time. Rick says they've got it under control, and she walks away while telling them to watch where they're walking. It was nice of Rick to tell her to watch where she's going. Rick says that Summer's brain blasters are brutal even for him. She almost never goes on adventures. I guess she does, and it's off screen. But both the show and the Mr. P story arc imply that it's always Rick and Morty, which makes sense because Summer waves aren't going to be useful to him. Though he could have Summer with Morty, but Summer wouldn't do everything he wants. I guess she gets those bad memories because she steals his portal gun to have some fun and he has to go after her, and she gets into trouble on the alien planets, or a bunch of aliens come home and bother her. And maybe the writers assumed that Summer's a more popular character than Morty, so the writer assumes that it wouldn't be funny to see Summer's brain blasters, when you could see someone wimpy suffering instead. Reference to the show or not, it'd obviously be more creative to have Summer's brain blasters instead of the same exact premise. Morty is smart enough to ask if reloading and deleting memories is hurting his brain. He wonders, maybe our memory eraser isn't working right. Like, maybe I keep coming back in here because I don't entirely forget about it? Or I subconsciously recognize parts of my memory I'm missing and I'm trying to complete myself for something? With the first part, that's why it's so stupid that Rick has him wake up in this room after erasing his memories. Of course he comes back here, he remembers it. You'd think this would trap him in an infinite loop. Rick realizes he's right, erases his memory, and opens up something, and is ridiculously reckless by throwing a yellow tube to catch it. Then he trips and breaks it, and he calls out for Summer. But why? What's a yellow tube? Why is it isolated? Why would he want to forget his memory of this? That's so petty. So many different memories were in this issue that it'd be hard for me to remember them all for the summary. I loved this story because nearly all the memories were interesting enough to make up for the fact that they were cruel to Morty. Which was unavoidable because why else would they get erased? It was especially interesting that at one point he put a memory back in right after removing it just to find out where his hockey gear was. And it turns out that he doesn't even play hockey. And he just wanted an excuse to get Beth out of the room so that he can make Jerry relive his own memories for what he did to Morty. It's too bad there's never going to be a Jerry's Mind Blowers episode. Sure, this issue was based on an episode of the show, but that doesn't make it lazy because it's not like the entire plot was the same. It wasn't even similar to it, like the comic Pickle Rick. That was much lazier. All of the stories were original, and most of them weren't forced. Most of them. I can't imagine why Morty thought the butter robot could fight a guard. I wouldn't mind having another issue with this kind of plot, and it didn't have the same dark ending as the episode of the show. Instead, Morty just wants to forget everything and things go back to normal. I feel like there are only a few stories that were outright great in this one. A lot of the stories were kind of underwhelming, like right up to the unicorns part. The only big problem I have with the issue is that it should have been explained that the reason Rick stores Morty's memories instead of just getting rid of the tubes is because he wants an excuse to punish him with them. Without that, there's no explanation for him keeping the tubes around. He uses them to punish Jerry. If he really wanted to keep him out of that room, he would have just had that room be on a different planet entirely. But instead it's so easy to stumble into that he gets there just by trying to fetch him a gadget from the sub-basement. And he somehow wanders into the wrong basement. Why doesn't he go down here every time he goes to the sub-basement then?